And we are live. That was good. Okay. Hey, welcome to our MiSec Jackson meetup. It's excited to be here. Yeah? We got a bunch of new speakers tonight, so it'll be very exciting. Raise your hand if you're speaking. Excellent. Then, just a couple announcements right now. Again, for Converge and B-Sides Detroit. We just announced our keynotes right now. So we'll be having Amanda Berlin, Kevin Johnson, and Johnny Xmas, or Christmas, if you will. So definitely, if you haven't already, if you're going to volunteer, there's a volunteer sign-up sheet on our website. Go on there, fill it out. Otherwise, tickets are for sale. I don't really have anything else besides that. If you do have a presentation that you'd like to present, we still have our CFP open. So very much welcome.
Oh.
Yeah. So definitely get them out there while they're still fresh. All right. With that, who wants to go first?
Canyon does.
Sam knows.
Sam?
I'm not speaking tonight.
You're not?
For now.
Oh, you were.
I'm just gonna read swiper jokes if I do.
All right. Next up.
We don't have a C-Flaws opening joke.
No, we don't. That's true. I don't have one right now.
Did you hear about the one about the person that went to talk to the librarian asking for a book on Schrodinger and Pavlov?
Nope.
Librarian said, I don't know if it's here or not, but it rings a bell.
That'll work. All right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I'll get the Wi-Fi connected to you. Technical difficulties, but we work on that.
We'll see if it works, if it's worth it. My demo. If I go there. No worries. No, I like it.
What? I'll get there. Okay, wait for this. Try to focus. It's not like the link is changed at all much. You
Otherwise
notice it always is like a live stream at the end of it, or live.
If it's too much of a hassle, I have like a PDF version, but you don't get like the animated GIF bit, which is kind of like nice. The effect is like the motion. So I can do anything.
Here we go. Hold on a second. Should just come up as this.
Oh, lost my mouse. As soon as I plugged it in, it froze. That's solid. I like it. I'll unplug it.
That working?
No, not working right now. Hold on. I'll just. No, Mr. Mac, no. Oh, hey. Technical difficulties for sure. Alright, well. I'm gonna reboot it.
Welcome to my section.
Yeah. If anyone else wants to go as a working computer, I can like reboot this. Otherwise,
Oh, hey.
Man,
Man, today is just, it's going to be a rough day, right?
that's cool.
I blame daylight savings time.
I'll go with that.
Seems logical.
It's been my excuse all week.
Oh, you're not plugged in.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a second.
Okay.
Anyway. Probably have to log into everything anyway.
So I guess while we're waiting at the moment, anyone have any exciting news? Things going on? About that AMD exploit, huh? Yeah? Vulnerability? Just a couple?
People in class house that shouldn't throw rocks. Just saying.
It's what happens. Canyon make sure you're not ready.
I mean, I can go with A and B.
Sure.
Alright, so you need to,
Why we swap out?
yeah, I don't mind swapping out right now.
Are we currently experiencing slight technical
Yeah,
difficulties?
I remember I have to log into everything again. Like I had to reboot my box and cancel things because when I plugged into the HDMI, Mac was like, "Nah, I can't handle this for a second." So I'm gonna do this if someone wants to verify.
Alright. Canyon?
Is that often occur, or is that just?
No, it just happened. I was like, "All right, go."
Do a cartwheel?
Under pressure, hands can't
There you go. That goes the shoulder too.
Before they had that kind of issue.
Yeah, it's a 1000. I have a MacBook Pro too. Once in a while, I have to
Actually, it's like a single stand thing, right?
was the Wi-Fi?
Well, you did the computer thing, so it's more of a.
Oh, you want to go to CMS guest
Oh, it's a Hi-Fi. It's probably that one.
or
Yeah.
that one? Never mind.
See that? Connect to it. You good?
Connecting to it now.
Alright.
So we'll see how it goes.
totally not a repeat.
You plug in your screen?
I'm screenshotting.
No. Where? Oh, HDMI. The power of HDMI. I hope this works.
That's a
That
good
one
right
of
for
those
books for
gold
tree.
plated.
Is this one of those rooms where I need to turn off my Bluetooth, my Wi-Fi?
There we go.
Full battery.
Well, it's too late if you have it, so it doesn't matter.
Don't
Ready?
worry, if it's on.
Set, go! And Canyon, everyone. Okay. Hello, my name's Canyon. I'm going to do a quick talk on how to secure a server with a service that I was taught in one of our classes at JC by our fellow member Daniel Ebbett. He, during one of our classes for firewalls, he told us that there's this really awesome program you can install on a Linux machine that is called Fail2Ban. It is a package that when you install it onto your system, keeps a monitoring of your logs, and you can specify multiple different types. And what it essentially does is creates jails for your different services, so whether that be SSH, FTP, mail, if you have any type of mail server, you can also do like FTP servers. And what it will do is it will monitor your logs for any type of authentications that fail. So in the course of, say, when you try to SSH into a machine, and you can specify how many attempts you can go at logging into the machine that are failed before it actually bans, and this is where you get your fail to, and then it bans the source IP of where it's coming from. For however long you want to specify, and then how many times between each attempt it will allow before it bans that certain IP address through IP tables. And then you can also specify then a time limit of when that span of being banned will be, and then when that time is up, it will unban that IP address. So in case you accidentally ban yourself from not logging in correctly with either the right credentials or whatever, it will not completely lock you out. Now there is a way to get around it at the same time, is if you are at least on a landline, either through like Ethernet or just plain Wi-Fi. If you have another device from a different IP address, so example, if you used your mobile hotspot on your phone, or if you just use like LTE, you can log in through that way if you have an SSH client either on your phone or if you're able to use the hotspot. That is another way to kind of circumvent it if you at least knew what you did wrong the first couple times. So what I'm doing is on my server that I run, I use the Fail2Ban to protect mainly a few of my outside facing boxes that I use. One of them being the main actual host for the system. So that's mainly only having SSH going outbound, so that I can protect it from not having to run everything on one single box. And so I run Fail2Ban specifically for the SSH session on the host. Another one I'm going to be standing up is a MiSec container, just so I can demo, I guess, what it is like to use the actual application, and also try to show you a ban that happens in the actual place. So let's start up our container.
we're going to get a nice little prompt. Don't yell at me for logging into root. This is just a temporary thing.
What's the password though?
JC students might be able to guess that one. No. So we are presented with our normal system. So this is a when you first start setting up your own system, you want to set up as like a server, and you want to face it outbound for whatever content you want to run on it. So in this case, I'm just going to do the SSH jail for it, just to keep things short and simple. So we first start out with our prompt, and on our system, we want to do a apt install fail to ban. Did I miss something wrong? Why is that not working? There it is. So we grab our package real quick, and it's really small, mainly just because all it is doing is just monitoring the logs. It's not actually like doing anything complicated. So it's a very small footprint if you do want to throw it onto your system. So now that we have that running, when you install it, it does start up by default as running. So it will pretty much be ready to go as soon as you get it installed. Now, the main thing you want to do when you go into your actual configuration to actually configure your jails and configure all of the different things like the time to ban and all of your different other jails that go along with it, they are located inside of your Etsy directory under fail to ban. So we will go under Etsy fail to ban.
Can you pull Larry and make it huge font?
I cannot do that on this one, unfortunately.
All right, thanks.
That is the limitation of Proxmox's web UI thing.
You might be able to use Windows Magnifier.
Oh, that would definitely be a Larry.
I don't remember how to bring that up though.
It's under the tools.
If you just type in Magnifier into the start menu.
Yeah.
Just type mag.
Just
Type
type mag
mag.
at the bottom.
Just start typing mag.
Well, actually, I think there's a. Is it Windows Control? Yes, it is.
Awesome.
I remembered it. I just didn't want to like not do it correctly on the first try. Okay, so is that good enough, Doug?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Lines.
cool. Anybody else?
No, it's the screen.
That's the screen.
Anybody else? Are you guys able to see in the background? Good. Okay, cool. So let me try and move this out of the way. So we have our directory inside of Etsy fail to ban. Now, what's inside of here is we have mainly a couple of configuration files. I'm not going to mess with these right now. They are mainly for advanced use of the program. But our main one that we're going to be focusing on is our jail.conf. Now, there are two different ways that you can handle this. You can do, what I'm going to do is the quick and dirty way because it's just a temporary OS. But you will want to take and copy your jail.conf and create it into a jail.local file, so that when you do when you do an update on your system and it may update that package, it will not destroy the original configuration file because it will be overwritten if you do update the application. That is one key thing that Daniel emphasized on, because you will lose all of your configuration files if you don't do that. So right now, like I said, I'm going to do the quick and dirty way. I'm just going to edit the jail.conf just for right now. But you will definitely want to create a separate file for this. Now, you can place it in the default directory of the fail to ban, or you can place it inside of the jail.d directory, and it will be able to read from both of those directories, the application, when it's sifting through what configuration file it will use. So we are going to go in and go for our jail.conf. Now in here, there's going to be a lot of configuration commands. Like I said, right now we're going to mainly focus on our SSH-based stuff. So inside of here, we have our default ones that they have for the configuration base time. So our ban time by default can be set to whatever we want. Right now it's 3,600 seconds. And then we can enable what type of service it's going to be. So in this case, for this configuration, it would have been an SSHD, and then we would have that enabled to true. But that's not the one that we're going to be mainly focusing on because the actual one is down a little bit further. Now, for fail to ban, the initial time, so this can cover the actual default for everything. This will override, or it will be overridden by the individual configurations, but this will be the default one, is what is going to be for our ban time. Right now it's set to 600 seconds. Now we can increase that, we can lower that depending on how bad you don't want people brute forcing your stuff. Because that is what fail to ban definitely is able to protect against a lot. I've looked at logs before of how many fail to ban IP table entries have been made on my own personal system, and there's a lot of them. A lot of them from China, a lot of them from Russia, as you kind of would expect elsewhere around the world, trying to break in just to any service that has stuff running SSH. So this guy we could set to a higher number if we wanted to for the actual ban time that this IP will be banned. Now the second portion is the fine time. This is when pretty much the max retry, so how many retries are specified between each attempt that will be allowed. The next one that we would want to configure is our max retry, and this is how many times they actually can try before they are banned. Normally on my configuration I put this to 1 because I use SSH keys, and Daniel has always pretty much said you put it to 1 because you either have the key or you don't. It's one or the other. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I have, though, on my other containers that run on the local internal systems network, I have that set to 3 just in case accidentally I do grab the wrong key. But that's just because if I've already been able to get into the system on its own, I trust myself that I was able to get in initially so that I can figure out which key I was going to be using, because there are a lot of different hosts that I have on the internal network. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this guy, though, to 1 just for a quick test for what we're going to do, trying to log in from another box. So we are going to save this guy. Actually, you're not. I got to go down and edit the other one because that was the default one. We want to change the SSH one. So going through all of this garbage, we get down to the actual SSHD portion, and this is where we have our SSH servers, and we can specify what port it's going to be looking for. So we will be looking under the SSH port, the log path, so this is where it will specify where the actual logs are for SSH that it'll be scanning for, and then the back end for the actual back end of the SSHD daemon. So this is also where we can also specify in case you get DDoS over the SSH port, you can also disable that through here. That will pretty much add everything to deny and drop if you need be. You can configure that through the configuration in another jail setting. But those are going to be the main ones for the SSH that we're going to deal with, or looking in through those logs. So for right now, though, I'm going to quickly set the retry to 1 again. And that was down here. Oops. Okay, so I'm only going to get 1 attempt at this, and I've already set a password onto the SSH daemon. Now what we're going to do is I'm just going to go in from another box, and let's go up to the top, I'll log in, shell, get this guy in. I'm going to SSH in through and try and talk to our little guy that we set up for fail to ban. And we're going to see if we can get in. Now I'm just going to put in goop, see if anything happens. Get permission denied. Goop again. Permission denied. I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go in again. Gook. We get permission denied. Now, because that has failed, we are now no longer able to get in to the system. It's been banned through the IP tables on the other host. So we can drop over there. And we have been successfully able to be banned from our other IP. Yep. Reject with down on the bottom from anywhere unreachable. So now that we have that in place, if we wanted to, we could wait 600 seconds and then that IP would be unbanned and we could attempt to log in again. Now you can customize this, like I said, with SSH keys. This makes it even a lot stronger, especially if you do set the max retry to 1. And if you even then have a strong enough key, you aren't going to be able to get pretty much brute force ever. Especially if you turn off the plaintext passwords option in SSH, its configuration. So that's how you ban IP addresses in Fiddleban.
So it's blacklisting the IP address?
Yes.
And now, from the outside, is there any way of seeing that the failed ban is currently running?
From what I've been able to tell, no, because all it does is, like I said, monitor logs. There's no outbound type of like traffic that somebody would be able to really, I guess, tell that they have had a ban in place, besides the fact that they just can't connect in then.
So it's just intercepting the traffic after it's already gotten inside the box?
Yep, and like I said, it goes through IP tables, so it's kind of sitting on top of it, and then it's also sitting on top of whatever jails that you make for whatever services you want to protect against with. So like I was saying, that you could set up, say, an FTP server, and you could have that protect that for how many retries. So you could say, because FTP is very insecure nowadays, if you wanted to just set up one for like a temporary use, but you still didn't want to have it access to the whole world, and worry about, you know, somebody brute forcing your password that you have set on there, you can set this up to block those retries, and as long as you are able to set it in a reasonable amount for a clear text password, say like 3, just in case, you know, you hit the wrong password once, you hit it twice, maybe on the second time, the third time you get it, you don't ban yourself at the same time, but it does help not make it where it can be brute forced. So it's definitely a very, very useful tool, because it also does the IP table banning for you instead of you having to manually go in and figure out what it is you have to ban, the IP. It does it all automatically for you, so it kind of gives you, I guess, a peace of mind for when you're running your stuff outside.
Now, I'm assuming this logs all this, but is there any way that it can send out a notification to you that this is happening?
That an IP was banned on your service?
Yeah, maybe if it says, hey, more than 5 IPs have been banned within 3 minutes, kind of thing. What the heck's going on?
I've never.
Sure there's a way to do it.
I mean, I know
There's
you can
definitely
find
a
your own
sure
code
way
for
to
but
do
is that
it.
a built-in feature?
Not as far as I'm aware of. I've never looked too deep into that. How I used to do it, where I got to see what IPs have been banned over the course of the period, was when I just ran a simple Logstash application. I just had it forward the outbound traffic into an HTML document, and I just hosted it onto my server, and I would just check that every day or so to say, oh yeah, hey, this is what happened, these are how many IPs have been banned, and, you know, making sure that it's actually doing its job. So
Now, as far as like if there was a successful log on, you know how some things like, hey, you just logged onto this computer for the first time from this IP address. That kind of thing? As far as sending out notification, that sort of? Or any sort of putting in a 2-factor or anything like that? Or is this just strictly just blocking?
it's strictly mainly denying stuff that should not be. It's mainly a brute force deer, essentially.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Can you customize the deny method? Like say instead of reject with ICMP port unreachable, can you just do a drop?
Yes, you can. Yep. That's in a couple of the other configurations that I don't want to have to jump in to find right at the moment, but I do know it is in there.
Cool.
And you can customize that. Like I said, there are a whole load of other configuration ones. This is just the main one, and I only went over just a few of the configuration pieces you can have, but you can definitely configure that however you would like. because it is just, like I said, basic IP tables that it's just sitting on top of. So it's very, very useful if you know your IP tables. You can specify that in this. So, anybody else? All right, coding.
Thanks.
Pretend this will work now.
Yes. Round 2. Fight.
Believe in the heart of the cards.
You could just, present it to us in interpretive dance.
I mean, honestly, at one point I'll just do that. Okay, so that's wonderfully. Oh, no, there we go. Let me see if I can fix this real fast. System preferences. Display.
Yes.
I love it.
Apple easy.
So fun. Okay, guys, we got this. So this is gonna be like going over like a kind of the thing I did this past Sunday, kind of like building up this Kumo Dojo. It's like cloud dojo, like way place things. Anyway, and it was built like Terraform, Docker, and a Slack bot. And I'll see a little bit of Ruby because that's what I do with my life sometimes. Anyway, so I'm Kent, and then picatz Gruber. If you don't know me, I like the picatz thing. That's what I call myself. Anyway, this is where I'm basically like telling you the story of what I like kind of built, how I did it or whatever. And it's a Slack bot, and I can be like, have I joined? And it's like you haven't tried to join the environment, so it's like, kind of conversation based. And then I want to join, and it gives me this private SSH key that I can log into, and it gives me a Docker instance, Ubuntu 16.04, and I can like practice commands on, stuff like that. And then I like built this out for my team so that they can all do this and practice stuff, in the cloud. This is built on AWS. Anyway, so it's a cloud-based security competition practice environment. And like I plan on doing other things other than just the Ubuntu 16.04, but that's what I did for this. And so like cloud technology, it's basically like using someone else's like nicer computer. It's pretty powerful and relatively marketable in terms of like if you go look at like jobs like AWS, Google Cloud, those are pretty neat skills to have sometimes. Basically, we're going to be like going over how I was using Terraform and AWS to build a cloud infrastructure for cybersecurity competitions, and we'll go over what those are. So Amazon Web Services, Amazon, they built this whole platform to like sell you their computers basically, and for all sorts of different stuff. But basically, we're just going to be buying a little section in their cloud to run a Linux box. But they do all sorts of different stuff too. And then Google Cloud Platform, this worked just as easily on there. I really like Google Cloud Platform, but I did AWS in this case. So whatever, right? It's fine. Anyway, so I use Terraform. I really love Terraform. Terraform works on those. It works on Azure. It works on like Alley Cloud, whatever. Terraform's really great technology. And I don't know. Ruby as well, I know. Anyway, and it's a Slack bot. I really like Slack. A lot of teams that I know like Slack, and chat ops is really cool, and building bots on Slack is pretty easy. And then I use Docker for isolation, because I'm basically allowing people to SSH into this EC2 instance that I'm running on Amazon. So I want like some like way for this to like kind of be like all like wrapped up nicely and it to be cleaned up and a little bit isolated. And Docker provides a really neat platform for kind of allowing that. And we're going to do all over SSH. So Docker's pretty neat. And so what kind of like Docker is, if you don't know, kind of like in a summary, it's like if this was like your host operating system and you had all these services like SSH and FTP, HTTP, MySQL, and everything else that you have on the system, those are all just processes. They have PIDs, and that's great. And basically, Docker is just another one of those things, and everything else didn't go away, but I just put Docker there and ran out of space, right? But basically, what I kind of do is that for everything now, basically, I put everything inside a Docker. Everything's now a Docker container, and they're all isolated, so to speak. Docker containers is basically a host or operating system level virtualization. So it's using the basic things that your operating system has, typically in Linux, like C groups and all these things that I don't even know how to go into, honestly. But basically allows me to like basically just see these processes. If I like were to like attach a bash shell to the SSH, or I would SSH into it, I could just, for example, just see the processes for the SSH. I wouldn't see the FTP or the HTTP or the MySQL. But yeah, so Docker's pretty neat. So, and then there's some neat stuff that goes along with that too, where like, let's say my SSH goes down or the process dies or whatever, I don't know what happened. There's health checks, like built in right into Docker, and that's pretty freaking sweet, because then it's just like, boom, I have a health check, and then it's all back to normal. It just restarts on failure. And it can restart on failure forever, even if the failure is like critical, and then it just puts on a constant recycle. It's really great. You can just do that with Docker, and I love it. So Docker's all about running isolated processes, running on your box, and it can be really powerful for talking about like security. And then there's some security concerns with it, but I love it. Anyway, authorized keys. So I'm allowing basically people to SSH in, and I just want them to run Docker. I don't want them to do anything else on this EC2 instance besides run Docker, which they can do anything else in that EC2 instance. So whatever, right? I'm just kind of pretending I know security. So basically, inside of SSH authorized keys, you have all this extra syntactic sugar that people don't really go over. Like typically in your SSH .ssh authorized keys or whatever, you just have like a bunch of SSH RSA things in there. Those are all your public keys that people SSH into your server, and it's wonderful, right? And you get to SSH into your server. If you wanted just to do one thing, just attach one command to this SSH public key, I could just do command equals and then the quotes and then anything else I want to run in there. And it could be anything. It could be echo hello there, and then that will be the only thing that runs with this SSH public key. And that's pretty neat. Because then it could just be, what if I just put a Docker thing in there? And it was just like mind blown. That's all I got to do to administer my stuff is generate SSH keys for Slack users. And there they go. They get Docker instances, and it's all wonderful. So basically, this is all I had to do, right? Is that I could just have a little local Git repository. There's all these Docker things. If I wanted to like expand upon it, I just have the Ubuntu stuff right now. And then just an SSH server with authorized keys that people go to. And then bam, they can SSH over the internet and get boxes all day. And then this is all I did though. It was just like, you get Ubuntu instances in Docker from a public IP address when you SSH in, and I don't have the Slack bit in here, so this diagram's a lie, but that's fine. So it could be like expanded out to do other things though. If I didn't want just SSH, I could have an HTTP server, and I could do it on weird ports if I wanted to. I could do all sorts of really neat things inside of Docker besides just running SSH in an Ubuntu container. So what does that look like sort of in action? It's like, this was the Docker file that I had specifically for that Slack bot. I'm not going to show you all the Ruby code because who needs to look at Ruby code? I showed you enough at some point. So basically, I just get Ruby 2.05, I install some gems, I copy the local file over to the container, and then all that container does is run that Kumo Dojo bot thing. That's all it does. And then all of my Terraform stuff, this is what Terraform looks like. And it's like infrastructure as code, it's a configuration file. So if you can do configuration files, and we just went over configuration files, you can do Terraform, easy. And there's some other stuff that goes along with it, but just sum it up that way. So I want a Ubuntu container, or not a container, a VM in AWS. That's all I have to say for this. And then a security group, basically I'm allowing anything on SSH because I'm YOLO gangster like that, right? And I just want people to SSH in, I don't want to deal with IP addresses. And then the AWS key pair, this is going to be my admin thing, so this is going to be the thing I can actually log into that VM with. And this is something I just generated, and I'm just pulling locally with that file, interpolation. And this is basically building a key pair. This is all going to be in the GUI too. Like, you're going to be able to see it if you wanted to, but this is just like writing it as code. But you'll see how we apply this later. So then this instance, after I had I specify the EC2 thing I want, the Ubuntu thing, now I'm going to run it as a T2 micro, and I can specify this up and down. The T2 micro is like 1 CPU and 1 GB of RAM in AWS, and it's like pennies to run. So it's like, I think it's like $7 a month or something like that if I wanted to, but I'm on their free tier still, so that's great. And I'm going to run it in the East region, I could run it in the West region, I could run it in Europe if I wanted to. I'm specifying the AMI that we called earlier, and then that Kumo Dojo admin key pair that we created earlier. And this is just like part of that, because then I want to actually do stuff with this. Like, I didn't put Docker or anything on this, right? Now we're actually going to do a thing where we're actually going to install Docker. So I have this local script on there that installs Docker. And so this is a way to basically provision that thing over SSH with that private key that we just made earlier, right? That we had earlier. And then another thing, we could just add a file on there, or a directory. So I had that bot directory with that Ruby stuff and the Docker stuff. Well, I just can provision a file there and just connects over SSH and adds a file to it, just like the same other thing if I go back to it. It's very similar, so instead of a scripts, it's just the file, the source destination, right? Pretty interesting. And then the remote exec, another one. This is the exact same sort of thing, but now it's inline shell scripts. So now you can actually see those shell commands that are running to actually, touch the special SSH authorized key file, game keys because I want to gamify this later. And then I actually build, in those last 3 lines, I actually build the Docker container, and then I run it. So I want to actually just run the Slack Ruby bot forever. And so this is that Docker run syntax kind of like broken out into just a long line that's been broken up with those slashes. But I'm going to restart it unless it's stopped. I'm going to name it Kumo bot. I'm going to attach the local volume game keys that we just touched earlier, right? And then I'm going to attach it to the game keys, just the /, right? I'm going to have a health command because I'm going to do health checks every 10 seconds. And basically, I'm just making sure the Kumo Dojo bot stays up. And then it's going to restart and fail arena if that dies, right? So that's great. And then the last bit inside of the Terraform file is I just want to know the public IP address of this thing so I can SSH into it and administer it. So what does that command line workflow look like? It's actually relatively simple, though that was quite a bit to write, though I mostly copy-pasted it from examples that are all over the internet. So I'm at a shell prompt, and I can ls. I have the ubuntu.tf. That was all that Terraform stuff earlier. And notice I don't have any Docker stuff. I'm just focusing on the Terraform stuff here. And then I have the setup.sh because I want SSH keys, and I want to deal with any ones I've previously generated. So I'm going to run that setup file, and I'm going to have that public key and private key now. That's all that happened basically there. Awesome. I'm going to clear the screen because I didn't have enough room. Anyway, so then I'd write Terraform plan, and then I would just show you some stuff, but we don't need to even worry about what that does. But basically, we just see that it's going to add 3 things, change nothing, and destroy nothing. Wonderful. Let's clear the screen because I ran out of room. All right, so let's do some more stuff, right? So we planned it, but we didn't do anything. All right, let's apply it, and let's not worry about it asking us to approve it. Let's just auto-approve because scriptable, right? All right, here we go. It's going to create that key pair. Awesome. And I noticed the example was different because I reused these slides. Oops. All right, so security group is Friday example instead of Kumo Dojo, but whatever. It's created that security group, and then it created an AWS instance, and then it did everything else. Great. So it added 3 things, changed nothing, destroyed nothing. Awesome. I can show what happens just by typing Terraform show to like see all those things. That's great. And then that like in theory then automatically builds up this Kumo Dojo thing. Then I can go ask if I joined, and since it is built from scratch, I haven't joined yet. So then I can join, and then bam, I can get that SSH private key, and the bot does all the generation of that stuff. So if I were to like vim Kumo the thing, I just copy paste from Slack. I make the SSH private key a little bit like. You have to make it secure, otherwise your operating system might yell at you or something like that. Anyway, that's what I had to do, so Shramad 600, YOLO. Anyway, and then I can SSH and to that public IP address that the bot will give me at the very bottom of that private key. And then I specify the private key as a local file with that Kumo. And then I get a Docker instance, and I can ls CPU, I only have 1 CPU, and that's great, whatever. And then if I exit out of it and SSH in, I get new Docker instances every time. And those are what those red arrows are trying to show you, is because those host names change every time. Anyway, so I'm done with this. I want to work from scratch or whatever. I'm just like done with this whole infrastructure. This, I just do Terraform destroy, and it tears everything down. And that takes like a couple seconds, honestly. And it's all, basically all that, like most of this boilerplate is on GitHub. I'm going to add the rest of it very soon. And it's like everything else on my GitHub, but picatz. PKICAT, I don't know how to spell, whatever. You just go there and it says Terraform AWS Ubuntu Docker thing. And it's just the setup.sh and the Ubuntu thing. You just run those exact things. Anyway, so that's all, folks, basically, unless you want to like see me run the things and watch it live break or something like that. I'd be totally down to do that, but otherwise I'm good with this. All right.
Awesome.
Any other questions? All right. Solid. All right, thanks.
Transitioning speaker. Transitioning speaker.
30 seconds out here.
No problem.
All right. So my name's Emily, and that's my Twitter handle if you'd like to follow me on Twitter. How many of you have worked with Vagrant before? Oh, just 2 of you. How many of you have heard about Vagrant? Okay, cool. All right. Wow. All right. That's awesome. All right. I am an InfoSec noob, if you will, and I really like Vagrant. It's been helping me learn, and I've been asking people about it, and I've found that people actually use it in the field, and they too love it. But all I'm going to touch with you today is just like how to get started. So if you're like curious and like, oh, I'd like to touch Vagrant, I'd like to see like, oh, if like there's applications that I could use. We're gonna be doing that today, basically like the getting started tutorial. So like, what is Vagrant exactly? It's really not that complicated. All it is like an application that builds virtual machines using other hypervisors. And like default, it's gonna be using VirtualBox, and I'm sure we've all here have used VirtualBox, right? Yeah, for sure. So what are we gonna need in order to actually use Vagrant? We're gonna need to download Vagrant. We're gonna have to have VirtualBox on our computer, and we're also gonna need some kind of text editor. I'm sure we have all of these things. Well, we have the text editor, at least. And if you don't know already, these are all free, very free. Everything's free. We like free. So how are we gonna do this? I'm gonna run through really quick, like what you can have, what you look forward to, and starting up your VM using Vagrant, and then we're gonna do it together really quick because it's so fast. So first you're gonna initialize Vagrant within the directory you want to use, and Vagrant's gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna put a Vagrant file in here, and it's just gonna be like this default file. It's gonna be really intimidating at first. You're gonna be like, oh man, should I really be messing with this? But yeah, you totally should, because there's a ton of comments in there that guide you on like pretty much how to construct this file. So don't be afraid of all the text. This is what you get on the left. That's what Vagrant provides you with. If you took out all the comments, you're left with this tiny little code on the right. And it's almost ready to run and actually spit up a machine with just that code. But you have to replace that base with like an actual image. And the default file actually is like, hey, if you want, you can go to this website and we'll tell you which images to use, which is great. And we're gonna go to that site at the end of these slides. So I went to that site and I'm like, oh man, I want a CentOS box. So we're gonna choose CentOS. And if you see the Vagrant file on the right, you'll see that I've replaced base with CentOS there. And from there, we're ready to Vagrant up, which pretty much says, hey, Vagrant, tell VirtualBox to spin me up a machine. And Vagrant's like, oh yeah, I could do that. So I'm gonna talk to VirtualBox. I'm gonna do a bunch of stuff, and you could read through here. And I'm gonna get this machine ready for you. Since we have nothing pretty much in that Vagrant file, this is like really quick, and pretty much this is exactly what we'll be doing in a second. And from there, we're ready to SSH into our box. Oop. Yes. And that's that little tiny script there at the bottom, nothing crazy, just a regular old CentOS box. So now we're ready to do the live test. And let's say like you're like, Emily, I don't really like CentOS. That's fine. We could choose a different image. Let's see here, and we could do a trusty 64, which is Ubuntu 14. We do Ubuntu 16 here. Let's see. So if you're like, oh, I don't remember how I'm supposed to edit this file or what's going on when you go home, you click on that image there, and Vagrant will help you out. Let's see. I'm gonna kick this to the side. I'm gonna get a shell going here. Oop, sweet. Alright, so this is like a pre-built one. Actually, this is the example one. Okay, let's see, we'll start a new one. Oop.
Example 2.
Yeah, it already exists.
Oh, do I already have one?
Let's just make your example 2.
My bad. There we go. Thank you, guys. So let's see, example 2. Alright, we're in there. We'll do a Vagrant in it. Vagrant's like cool. I put a Vagrant file in there for you. We're gonna edit that. Oop. Oop. Replace space with what was it? Xenial? No, it was Ubuntu / Xenial 64. Alright, sweet. Alright, cool. And from here we could just Vagrant up. And if we were to look at like what was going on within VirtualBox, you'll see. This machine pop up here, and here it is. Ooh. So that's pretty cool. You could also, like, within the Vagrant file say, like, hey, I would like to run these shell commands as this box is built. And I have an example of that. Let's see. I won't spin up the box. This one's going here. Let's see. Documents. So, and here you could say like, okay, I don't want the GUI. I want 2 CPUs. I want 2 gigs of memory for this VM, and also when this box is spun up, I want it to run, update. I want to have Git on there. I want Vim on there, and I want Apache as well. So that's pretty cool. This should be done already. I don't know what's going on over here. But yeah, we're pretty much just gonna log in, and then once you're in there, to exit out, you simply type log out, and it'll kick you out of there. When your box is running, you can, once you've logged out, you could say, okay, I'm done with this box for the day. You could shut it down, you could halt it. You can just suspend it if you just want to put it into a save state. This is gonna run for a little bit while longer, because I did say like, hey, I want to run an update, and I want you to install these things for me. I'm really not sure what's going on over here, unless like PowerShell's doing like a weird thing that I don't know about. I really am not. I'm really unsure. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Vagrant, then it's a cloud hosting service, or is it using your own CPU power, or?
It's local. It's on your CPU.
Okay, but they're hosting the files then, so you don't have to download the actual ISO? Or?
Oh, okay. I think it downloads it from the internet. Once it's already downloaded, I think, and you have that machine on your computer, you could just go in there. In order to like create a new machine from scratch, like for the first time, you're definitely gonna need internet connection. Like I need an internet connection for sure in order to do this, because I don't have the ISO on my computer. It's in Vagrant Cloud.
I mean, but you're not downloading like 5 gigs of an entire OS.
No, yeah, that is a good point. Yeah.
That's what I'm-
Go ahead.
You
Go ahead.
are though, like Vagrant files are typically like smaller. Like you are running just like a total ISO. Like you can attach Vagrant to an ISO that you built. That's how you build Vagrant boxes. It's like you literally go into anything, like whether it's VMware, whether it's VirtualBox, whether it's like KVM or anything like that, and then you can then specify a little bit extra Vagrant magic, which is basically giving like the default Vagrant SSH key for Vagrant to log in, and then it'll replace it for you. That's why it says like there's a default insecure Vagrant key.
Yeah.
And
Oh
there's
yeah.
That's where it comes
So-
from.
yeah, so that's why it does take a little bit of time. Sometimes it is like pulling down. It's not 5 gigs, but you can go like look at like the size of it. It is like relatively big, but yeah, you can roll your own if you don't want to. They're like built in, or you can like specify just another URL that you like host locally that are just Vagrant, your own Vagrant cloud. Or if you want to use cloud, you can specify you want AWS or Google Cloud.
Oh,
what
yeah,
got-
go right ahead, yeah.
Oh, what got you started using this then?
Actually, Kent got me started using this. But I've just been, I am new, and cloud technology seems really cool. And I actually thought like Vagrant was like, it's like some kind of like weird part of like these like terms, like cloud terms that I really didn't fully understand. Everything's got like a funky name, especially with AWS, right? And then I learned about like what it really was, and I was like, oh, this is cool, but how am I gonna use it? When I first was introduced to it, we were doing, our team was preparing for ISTS, and we were using it as like a way to like, what's the word? Like standardize the machine we were working on together. It was for a golden image, right? But I've seen people talk on YouTube often about like, oh, we like to use this for development because everyone's using the same machine, and there's no like, oh, I don't know if it works on my machine. It's like, well, no, we're all using the same machine, and it works or it doesn't work, or you're doing the right things or you're not. Which I like because I'm learning, and so I found a lot. I'm like, man, it doesn't work, and it's like, well, it does work, but you're not using it properly, which was good for me. Right now, I'm exploring Google Cloud Platform, and what I'm using Vagrant for the past couple days at least is like I've been trying to make these install scripts work properly and run and like give permissions in like the right order, and I've just been like every step of the way there's like a new problem, right? So as I fix the problem, I like to destroy the machine down and then have this new fresh machine, and then I get to see like, okay, is my install script working like I think it is? So which usually is not. So, but that's good though, right? Because I'm learning. So I'm like, oh, okay, so I'll fix this part, and not only that, but now like I have that in GitHub. So when I do start like a new project, and I'm like, and I go back to what I'm doing now, which is like experimenting with Flask, I can go back to some of those configuration files that I did pre-write, and I could be like, oh yeah, I did add that cool thing that I saw on Stack Overflow that was really obscure but is helpful, and I wouldn't have remembered otherwise. Which I haven't stumbled upon quite yet. I've just found normal useful things, but that's the long-term plan, right? So that's how I use it for learning. But again, I see a lot of people talking about Vagrant, about Docker, about Terraform, and I think Vagrant is like the least coolest thing of those. But it's the thing I'm most comfortable with because it is so basic, and that's why I chose to do presentation. But if you're like, man, I'm kind of interested in like any of those things, like for sure, go check them out. They're super cool. So yeah, automation. Woo. So that's it. Unless there are any other questions.
Can you manage a VM that's built in Vagrant just through the normal VirtualBox or VMware interface, or is it really meant to control the VM throughout its life?
I don't think it's. I think it's Vagrant is meant to give you a way to automate building VMs in and of itself. I don't think that it had like a intention of it being like, no, you can't use VirtualBox to manage your VM, because Vagrant's using VirtualBox to manage your VM. So, did I answer that question properly? Did that
Yes.
cover it? Okay, cool. Yeah.
Was that Ponyo?
Yes.
Yay!
Yes, it was.
I mean, my daughter loves Ponyo.
Everyone loves Ponyo. Somewhere in here is Ponyo. There we go. Ta-da! Thank you.
How about that? That ends our MiSec night. If I can find the button.
Announcement for next month.
Do you want to announce your talk?
Announce my talk. You know my
It's your talk, come on.
Yeah, but that's announcing things.
No,
He's the announcer.
it's a group effort.
Yeah,
It's a group effort.
Yeah.
Alright, let me get the talk name so I don't screw this up. Don't screw up my own
We'll hold you.
own talk
responsible
name.
forever.
Great. Oh, so much pressure.
It's like Casey Neistat over here.
Oh god.
You're still within reach.
I can get things thrown at me. That is very true. Hold on. Finding title. Acquiring title. Where to
Our
go?
talk for next month is going to be.
Wait for it.
Saving all the money to buy all the booze. Learning to hack all the things on a budget. It's a general rundown of free tools and low-to-cost tools to learn how to get into hacking. Basically something that I wanted to know 3 years ago when I started learning how to hack. So.
Yay!
Yay!